I'm joined today by Ifat Ribon, a principal architect at Launchpad Lab, a digital product agency in Chicago. She'll be delivering her talk, Yes and, Ruby's Secret Talent for Improvisation at Blue Ridge Ruby this spring. Ifat, thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned in your talk proposal to us that you'd spent years doing improv in Chicago, and I was wondering, how did you get into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do remember that as soon as I moved to Chicago, right after college, I was like, I have to take improv classes. Second City is in my backyard.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
actually right up the street from me right now where I
Oh,
live.
that's
And
cool.
I was like, I got to do that. But I would say I was probably originally introduced to improv when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Went to like a summer day camp, and one of the counselors there had like improv activities, and I think I just fell in love with the idea of being able to play pretend, be creative, and then build something with someone else to make people laugh. Like, what
Yeah.
more could you want?
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. My son has got his start in acting with doing an improv comedy group in middle school. He's
Yeah.
now in he's a junior in high school now and doing a lot of acting stuff. But it was so fun to like watch him do that and see that like talent grow. So that's cool.
Yeah, and it's fun to just kind of see what comes out, right? It's a little bit different from
Yeah,
scripted acting, but
totally.
you
Yeah,
kind of get to like play and jive and still kind of build a dialogue with someone else.
right. Yeah, and the group aspect of it is so important. It feels like everyone's playing off of each other, mirroring each other, or like working together. There's like a kind of connection there that happens that you don't see it in other settings that same way, I guess. I don't know. This is really
Exactly.
unique. Yeah. How do you think that studying improv, practicing it has impacted your work as a consultant and as a software developer?
Yeah, I like to tell everyone that everyone's improvising all the time. Every
Yeah.
time you have a conversation with someone, you don't know what they're going to say, and you have to think about your responses. And I'd say, particularly for me, I'm in consulting. I've been in consulting, my whole professional career. That's a lot of interacting in unexpected situations, right? I don't always know what my clients are going to say, and being able to rely on something like the yes and principle from improv, where you take what someone has said and you try to build it or heighten it or progress it in some way without shooting it down,
Yeah.
is really important, particularly when you're working with others, whether it is your clients or other team members. I think in particular, it's helped me build a lot of my ability to lead with validation and empathy, to help build trust first and rapport, so that even when you do come to a conversation, it's a little bit harder, right? You're pushing back on something or you want to go in a different direction, you have a much more collaborative way to do that. And I
Yeah.
think improv really hones in on those skill sets.
I think that was something I didn't appreciate earlier in my life and career. For me, it was like it felt like either dishonest or imprecise not to say no when I meant no, and to try to find the yes in something and then build from there rather than say no, like I disagree. That is
Right.
not the thing we want to do, or you as a client do not want that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that failed both in relationships and in client work. It's not a great way to go. But it took me a while to like realize that, I think.
Totally. Like all things, you learn a rule so that you can learn how to break it, so to speak, right? And the breaking of yes and in improv isn't so much no, and that's it, you're shutting it
Yeah.
down. It's maybe no and no or what if we did this? And it just helps still move it along, even if you are trying to diverge paths.
Yeah, I guess maybe the end goal regardless is progress in some direction rather
Yeah,
than stalling or something. When you stall,
exactly.
that's when it gets boring. That's when things fall apart.
So you want to sweep the scene and everyone just wants to get off stage,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. So, how did you come up with the idea of relating this to Ruby? Where did that come from?
That's a great question. I was flipping through my list of talk ideas, which I'm sure some other folks at Blue Ridge
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
growing list, and I think I jotted this one down probably shortly after I started improv, which was also a little bit early in my career
Yeah.
as a software developer. And I have given a lot of thought to how coding is so intertwined with language as a whole, spoken, written, English
Yeah.
language, particularly Ruby, right? Really shines
Yeah.
on that. So I think that it was an easy leap for my brain to be like, oh, Ruby is, known for its flexibility and its sort of ease of reading or conversational flow, and
Yeah.
the sort of like the block paradigm really like, kind of had a spotlight on it,
Yeah.
no pun intended, for really amplifying that kind
Yeah,
of like conversational flow.
that's cool. I also think about that just now. It occurs to me that like a lot of my career's not been in greenfield apps; it's been in legacy applications, and a lot of times you were having a conversation with past maintainers of a code
Hmm.
base, and so you're not saying no and putting an end to like you're not like doing a clean sweep of the code base. You are
Right.
extending and building on maybe decisions that you wouldn't have made yourself, or you're having to work within constraints that were set previously by someone else for you, and so you're having to improvise like on top of that. I guess I hadn't really considered that, but it does feel like there's a natural way that you're having to do that in legacy code bases in a way that you don't have to in greenfield, where you're making all these decisions and constructing the world from the ground up, with no other constraints from others.
Yeah, I really love that. I hadn't actually really fully thought of that either. So way to yes and Jeremy. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think I was working as a Rails developer for quite a while before I even realized that any Ruby method could accept a block. And writing Rails code, application code day to day, like I just hadn't noticed that in practice. And that's probably one of the downsides for me of the way I've learned has been going from practical to theoretical, rather than the other way around, which is a lot more the traditional route for a lot of people. Over your career, how have you approached learning Ruby's language features?
Yeah, I think that I probably followed actually a similar path as you did. I think for me it was a lot of sheer exposure to code, reading code, either, for me the benefit of being in consulting and working on project base with a lot of developers. I get to
Yeah.
see a lot of code, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I also think a big sort of like level up for me was when I actually realized I could go look at source code for
Mhm.
gems and things like that and
Yeah.
really peel back the layers, peek under the hood, and started to see a lot more of those patterns.
Mhm.
And for what it's worth, I think Ruby's very magical in what it does and how flexible it is, but it can also make it a little bit harder to see what's happening. It can be
Mhm.
hard when you're first learning the language to be like, oh, that's interesting syntax and that's a block, and I should go like figure out the theory behind that.
Yeah.
I think for me, it came from a lot of reading code and being like, I've seen that a lot, and someone finally told the name for it, and then I could kind of go explore more on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of my career has been practical application of code because I want to build things, and then learning as a secondary result of that, or realizing like, oh, I'm blocked by something, that sort of just in time learning, or sort of
Mhm.
backfilling where I realize, oh, I've got a gap here.
Oh
The
yeah,
downside of that has been like I've probably missed many places where you kind of miss the shape of a solution when you don't know the thing that can fit there, like the solution that can fit there, like a language feature that would be, oh, this is perfect for this. Until you learn that thing, you wouldn't
right.
recognize like the problems that it solves or whatever. What do you think, learning more about these kind of topics, like for people coming to a talk that's really about Ruby and maybe they're working practically day to day in Rails applications, what does learning more about Ruby's language features do for people that are spending their time writing Rails application code? How does that help them, you think?
I think it's pretty much exactly what you just said. I think that was a beautiful segue. Maybe you did that on purpose, but I think it's exactly that. I think when you do have more knowledge or grasp or depth of the language, you get to make a lot more intentional design choices
Yeah.
about your code. And like you said, you start to fill in the gaps around those instances where you were like, oh, I didn't even realize there was a solution for this.
Yeah.
This actually just happened to me on a project that I'm consulting with another existing dev team, and they wanted to have a collection of shared helpers in their test suite, and they had a lot of conditional blocks in there.
Hmm.
And what we discovered was there was so much shared code, and only the conditions were different. And that was such a perfect use case for a block.
Oh
You
yeah.
can just
Yeah.
go yield to the middle code,
Uh-huh.
only write where you need it. You're keeping the condition a lot closer to the scenario. I know that's kind of an abstract example, but that's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
Because I knew of the solution, I was able
Right.
to then advocate for that with another team.
That makes sense. And it's nice when you have those, because I feel like, for me at least, the way I learn is once I've stumbled onto something like that and then use it in a code base, I'll remember it in the back of my mind and be like, okay, I've done this before. And then I've got to go back through like 5 different like Rails code bases to find it. But I'll like, usually I'll know where it is. Like okay, that wasn't a controller or that was a helper, one of, a Rails helper method or something like that. In fact, like one that's common for me, like realizing like the power of blocks. One way that's happened for me has been in Rails, the view layer, where sometimes I'm writing helper methods, but what's like yielded in the block is some other ERB partial or something like that. That might be different, but whatever is wrapping it is the thing that is stays the same. And so I'm yielding to that with the block. So that's been a common one for Rails views. But there's so many things like that where I'm going back to previous code bases, previous places where I've solved something to be like, okay, that was the spot like where I bookmarked in my mind how I like discovered that thing and found like a real good use case for it. So it's probably a good unlock for that team as well to have that spot where they can go reference it in the future.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point around like we use yield all the time in partials. There are so many instances of it's particularly blocks that maybe developers hadn't even really clocked that that's what that is, or that's what that's doing. And
Oh
that's
yeah, I
probably
didn't when I first was writing Rails, I didn't know what's all this yield all over the place. Yeah,
Yeah. One of my favorite moments of like as I'm building applications, I learn new things is going back and being like, oh, that's just that. That's
Yeah.
just a method with no parentheses, or that's
Yeah.
just a block, or that's just this other
Right.
small fun Ruby feature that I didn't have a name for
Yeah.
before. I love those moments.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes some of when people talk about the magic or mystery of Ruby. Sometimes it just means like they didn't understand some language feature that wasn't apparent maybe to them. Because coming back to those things, you're like, okay, this makes sense. Like there's a reason
Right.
for this. There's sometimes an elegance to it that requires a deeper understanding to really grasp what's happening underneath. But without the understanding, you think of it as magic or something.
Right. Right.
I'm very excited to see your talk. I think it's going to be a really good one, both for newcomers to the language, really understanding like the power of Ruby and just these kinds of features, and hopefully open their eyes to that. But also for long-term Rubyists who just need a refresher and also a nice new lens with the improv angle, coming in and seeing it from that lens. So very excited for it. It'll be great to see you. So really looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm really excited to be back, and I'm excited to give this talk. I hope it will be fun and engaging and, also technical enough. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Thanks, Ifat.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy.